Fear Not, Episode 14. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Debra Fine. Welcome, Debra. Are you ready to fear not today?
I sure am, Billy.
Fine is the author of best-selling books, The Fine Art of Small Talk, How to Start a Conversation, Keep It Going, Building Network Skills, and Leaving a Positive Impression, and The Fine Art of Big Talk, along with her just-released Beyond Texting, The Fine Art of Face-to-Face Communication for Teenagers. A 20-plus year member of the National Speakers Association, Fine presents programs to hundreds of audiences around the world that include Google, Van Cleef & Arpels, Delta Airlines, KPMG, General Electric, and NASA. And her books are translated and published in 24 countries across the globe. A regular Huffington Post blogger, Fine's recent media appearances include The Today Show, NPR Morning Edition, Fox Business News, and CNN. Can you take a few seconds, Debra, and fill in the gaps and maybe give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Well, as you said, I used to be an engineer. I was inspired to do this because, number one, I was very awkward with people. Number two, I happen to have a huge weight problem. I was obese until my mid to late 30s. And I always thought if I ever finally lost that weight, that things would change. You know, friends would come easily, et cetera, et cetera. And I did lose all that weight, and thankfully I've kept it off. But it wasn't a magic pill for creating relationships in my life. So that's one thing that I think is important to share, is that I wasn't born with that gift of gab. And many of your listeners, maybe they may not be, but they'll understand certainly if they're either shy and or introverted what it's like to walk in the world when it just doesn't come that easily. And then as far as my personal life, I'm the mom of 4 grown children who are all self-supporting, and I am married to a wonderful husband for a very long time.
Thank you for that glimpse. Can you share with us one of your biggest fears that you've had to face?
Well, with relation to what we're talking about today, as conversation skills, networking, et cetera, it was truly a huge fear of mine was to approach a stranger. And by a stranger, I mean a neighbor. When I was in high school, a young girl or boy who was in a class and or at a meeting or a party, in college, a professor, at work, colleagues, et cetera. I would never, Billy, ever walk up to someone, even after church or synagogue, to wish them well and say hello. But if they walked up to me, then I seemed to be able to manage, certainly to be friendly. So I would say one of my biggest fears, although I don't have this fear any longer, at least not to that degree, is the fear of walking up to someone and attempting to be friends or make some kind of connection to them. And ultimately what I was fearing, I know that now, is rejection, that you might reject me, Billy, that somebody else might reject me. It was too painful to imagine.
What was it that you did that helped you to sort of overcome that?
The biggest thing I did, after I lost the weight, as I told you, I had really wanted to change my life because I finally was successful at something I tried to do my whole life. And when these friends just didn't appear, and girlfriends, I just want to have girlfriends. I thought, how are these people doing this? How are they connecting with people, building this social life, this community? And so I would observe people, just when I'd be with my little toddlers' kids, or when I would go to some function, and I would just think, how are they doing that? How are they doing that? And the way I really overcame it for myself before I ever considered turning it into a business is that I would tell myself that 3 times a week I had to start a conversation with someone new. So it could be in the grocery store line, it could be at back to school night, it could be at the mailbox getting my mail, seeing a neighbor doing the same, instead of just waving to go over and say, I've never really met you formally. I live in that house, you live in this house, tell me about your family. So 3 times a week, which doesn't sound like a lot, I know, but it was a lot to me, and it became very rewarding. And so initially it helped me pass the fear, and ultimately, I overcame the fear because it was so rewarding. Not to say that people didn't reject me, because of course they did, in kind ways, but nonetheless, rejection's rejection. But I think that the biggest piece I took away from it is like anything else in my life. One of the primary way I lost a lot of weight, which was about 80 pounds, was through exercise, and ultimately through learning how to, people call it running, but what I didn't understand until I did it was jogging. You cannot run when you are 300 and some pounds. I mean, and it's sort of a shame, I think, that we use that word so often. So I would try to run, and I would run for maybe half a block, and I would be wiped out. Like, who can run when you're not a runner? But I had to learn how to jog, and I'll tell you that once I made myself jog 3 to 4 times a week for up to an hour, I started at half an hour and whatever, the weights just started coming off and staying off. I mean, it was almost like a miracle. And I still implement that in my life. So to me, conversation skills and becoming really accomplished networker and conversationalist is the same thing as exercise, whether you like it or not. So if you don't like to go to networking events, if you don't like to walk into rooms with your spouse or partner where you don't know anyone, I get that, but you have to sort of make yourself do it. Like I do like this morning, Billy, I ran for a little over an hour. And I didn't want to. I'm tired. I just got in from Chicago yesterday. I had to get up at 5:30 in order to pull that off, put this interview in, do some other things that are part of my work today. But I didn't want to do it, and I hate to tell you because it sounds awful, but I didn't love it. Like so many people who exercise or run, they go, I get such a high. I just love it. Well, I don't love it at all. There's nothing about it that I love. But I do it, and I do the same thing now when I approach whether it be after church or synagogue or at someone's wedding and or a business industry conference. I tell myself, you're going to walk up to 2 new people or 5 new people, or I get to pick the number. I create the task, and then I must accomplish the task of doing what I promised myself I would. And then when I'm done with the task, I can leave. I can go home early. What a great feeling that is, to not feel so overwhelmed that I have to stay and do that for 3 more hours. I can get out of there, or I can go sit in the hotel lobby and wait until dinner begins, and at least I know, Billy, that somebody will be sitting on my right and my left, and then it'll be a lot easier to talk to people than at some reception or mingling session. So I think the best way for me in my little life has been to overcome fear is to make myself do it, although I have to admit the truth is that one of my other greatest fears is the fear of heights. And now that I'm done raising my children, I refuse to go on high things. I went on Ferris wheels. I did ski lifts and gondolas because, I raised my kids in Colorado, which is where I live. And I told myself I could not impasse this fear onto my children. So I would close my eyes and pretend I was resting or whatever. And the fear was just tremendous in my being. But I have decided to acquiesce to fear, Billy. You'll be disappointed to hear, and that you'll never catch me again on a Ferris wheel or on a gondola. Again, the end.
Because your book has made such an impression on me, and it definitely helped me to engage with people. Do you think that maybe you could share something, maybe a little bit of a takeaway from that book for the listeners that are like us, are terrified of talking to people?
You bet. First of all, I get what it's like to be terrified because we're terrified of rejection, and I think a lot of people are like that. So a lot of us have that commonality. I used to think it was just me. So if nothing else, is that you and I both impart that to anybody listening who may be challenged, is that they're not the only one. This is a pretty common dilemma for people. Some people are born with the gift of gab, and then there's the rest of us. So turn it into a task, as I mentioned before. I think that makes it more possible for all of us, because all of us are pretty good at tasks, or we wouldn't wear nice clean clothes every day. We wouldn't have succeeded at getting a college degree. Whatever it is in your life that you're do that maybe was a task and you're good at it, well, this is a task. You're going to talk to 2 new people after church this week. Let's start there. And it's what do you say that really holds us back, because so many of us are perfectionists. If we just had the perfect thing to say, well, then we'd be delighted to walk up to new people. We'd have no problem, but we don't have the perfect thing to say. So first of all, of course, it's up to us to walk up to someone, introduce ourselves, say hello first. That other person will introduce themselves. And then typically, Billy, the best opening line you can use is based on the free information we have about occasion or location. So if I were to meet you at a charity event or a volunteer situation under that same umbrella, I might say, how did you get involved with this charity, or what motivated you to volunteer for this charity? Because the free information I have is we're both somehow connected to this charity, at least today. You may be a long-time volunteer. You may have been dragged by your friend today. It will start a conversation. If I'm at an industry conference, I'll say to you, so what brought you to this particular conference? What do you hope to get out of it? If we're in a classroom setting, a training setting, an auditorium-style setting in the workplace, I'll turn to you. If we both work for the same company, I'll introduce myself. I won't act like there's a wall between you and me, and we just sat down and we start, playing with our devices. That's what people do now to separate themselves from one another. I'll say to you something like, I've never had a chance to talk to you. Tell me about your history in healthcare, or how'd you get into it, or bring me up to date. What kind of projects are you working on in your group right now? The commonality is the free information I have about the occasion, location. I bet most people listening right now have found themselves at a wedding where they've heard themselves or someone else say, how are you connected to the bride or groom? It's the same idea, right? It's that occasion is our commonality, and it's the free information we have about it. If Boulder is a big race here in Colorado, and if I run the Boulder, I can say to the person next to me, of course, before the race begins, say, is this your first time, or have you done it before? And how did you train for it? And that's the free information I have. So that is the best way to open a conversation with anybody, in my opinion. On the other hand, I could sit at a table of 8, Billy. You could be sitting next to me. Or you and I could be walking down a long, long hall on the way to a job interview or on the way to a meeting in your conference room. And I can simply just say something as simple as, wow, sorry that summer is coming to an end. That's a statement. It's not a question. It's not obviously an open-ended question. A lot of books say, you must start with an open-ended question. No, what you must do is you just must start. Somebody needs to start. And if I say, wow, I'm sad summer's coming to an end, I'm looking forward to my last hike before summer's end, or I'm really excited my kids went back to school this week, or anything that's a statement of self-disclosure, that opens a conversation as well. This is what doesn't open a conversation. How you doing? Good. How are you? Great. And we run out of things to talk about. How many people listening have done this with their own friends? How's life? Good. How are the kids? Great. What's new? Nothing. And then you just there's nothing to talk about. We sort of interviewed each other and run out of things to talk about. So I say ask a specific question about either free information, or if you've met the person before, Billy. So I've met you now, okay? We interacted via email. We're now on this podcast together. If you should ever reach out to me again and we're on a telephone line or a Skype line together again, what I can now say to you, and I can say to any acquaintance, somebody I've met only once, is, catch me up, Billy. What's new in your life since the last time we talked? How's that for a better question then? How are you, Billy? Because what are you going to say when I ask that? How are you, Billy?
Fine.
Right. But if I say, what's new with work since the last time I saw you, or new with business, update me on the business, Billy, I'm more likely to get a solid answer out of you. And that is because I asked a specific, detailed question. What's new in your life? So I don't know anything about your family, Billy, so I wouldn't go there. But if I had met you and I knew anything about your family, anything, whether it's a sister, a brother, a spouse, a partner, or kids, whatever, I would say, catch me up. What's new with the family since the last time I saw you? That's letting you know I really want to hear about specifics about your life.
Yeah, one of the things that I took away from your book the most, that it really is just about asking about the other person. You can keep the conversation by continually asking questions about the other person.
Yes, you can. To show an interest in others is the key. A lot of us, even the quietest ones, are really good at when somebody asks us questions. we're always prepared. We have the answers. And then we don't have to carry the burden of conversation someone else's. Oh, we just love that. That's just great. But I've got to tell you, Billy, there's even extroverts do this, introverts do it. It's very it doesn't establish rapport with people when people do ask too many questions. As an example, how many people listening right now have heard themselves do this? Billy, so play along with me, Billy. So, Billy, what do you do?
I'm a podcaster.
And where are you from, Billy?
I grew up in Arizona.
Okay, what you've witnessed is an FBI agent at work. I asked you two questions that were not connected in any way. So if I'm going to ask you, what do you do, and you say podcaster, I need to stay on topic and not jump to a whole other topic, because otherwise we're going to run out of things to talk about pretty fast. Plus, I'm going to put you, I could even hear a pause. You thought, where's she going with this? You know, you're allowed to interview me today on a podcast because that's the role. That's your role. That's the experience we're having. But in real life, I don't want to feel interviewed. You don't want to feel interviewed. We want to have a volley back and forth. So when you said, what do you do? I'm a podcaster, I would have said, well, what do you mean by that? I would have said, what does that entail? Describe a typical day for me, Billy. I mean, anything along those lines to stay in that topic arena. So I'm trying to sort of slow this down, have a real conversation with you. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But what you said is so true. A lot of us forget to show a genuine interest in other people. We're on a job interview and we think, well, I'm the candidate, so they're going to show an interest in me. Well, don't forget the decision maker to say to him or her, you know, tell me about your history with the company. Or even on a lighter note, to be in their office and notice there's a diploma up there from the University of Wisconsin and say, wow, you went to the University of Wisconsin. What brought you to California? That's a great question to ask to show an interest. Tell me about that trophy. Tell me about that picture. Tell me about the mission statement I saw in the lobby while I was waiting to be brought back to the conference room. You know, that is showing an interest in the other party, and sometimes we forget to do that when it's an authority figure or someone above us.
Can you share with us a resource that might help us overcome our own fears, something that has helped you along your own path that's really stood out?
Well, the biggest thing for me, and something I still make myself do, is turn it into a task. So I don't want to bore anybody listening to repeat that, but I have found that is the best solution for me, is to tell myself. If I worked for a corporation right now, I would tell myself on Monday morning that I was going to talk to at least 3 people, with either on the team or in the halls, for 2 minutes a time at the coffee machine at lunch that I don't know very well. Because especially if you're in a leadership role, if you eat lunch at your desk and you're in a leadership role, you are creating a silo. And I know everybody's so busy they have to eat lunch at their desk. We're all really busy now. Okay, if you are tied to your desk, you're not connected. You're not building rapport with your people. And do you want to engage your people? Okay, you can give them prizes. Hopefully you can give them more money, because we all like more money. But the best way to engage people is to show a genuine interest in them and have that rapport so that they do tell you the truth, so that they are loyal people on your team. So I would turn that into a task, talking to people within the organization, walking up to people at an award ceremony. If you're in a position where you go to a city council meeting, to walk up to people, fellow citizens that are standing at the meeting waiting for it to begin. Tell me what brings you here tonight. You know, go to back to school night. Don't just stand there with your spouse or by yourself. Look for people standing there, especially by themselves. Walk up to them and say, hi, I have a kid in 3rd grade. Tell me about your kid or kids. People love that. If somebody would walk up to me, Billy, and just show an interest in me, I would, number one, be flabbergasted. If I was at a party or at a business function, I mean, it's just such a joy and it's such a relief when somebody walks up to me, but people don't do it. They never think to do it. Yeah, so that's one thing I would say to people. And the other thing is to think about intention. If you intend to be a good conversationalist, build rapport with people, be the kind of person people want to be around, then there's a few things you need to do, in my opinion. One is never walk into a situation, whether it be one-on-one interaction or whether it be a group, occasion, event, association, industry conference, whatever it may be. Don't walk into that without being prepared. And by prepared, I mean 2 to 3 things to talk about in case there's nothing to talk about. Because the worst time to think of something to talk about is when there's nothing to talk about. So if if I've met you before, and I know you just mentioned that you're from the LA area, right, Billy?
I was born there. I was actually raised in Arizona.
Okay. So if I know something about you, that you're a podcast or whatever, I'll remind myself of what I know when I'm going to go meet you. But most people we don't know. So I'm prepared to talk about current events. I'm prepared even today. Here's the free information I have. If I were going to a luncheon today, sitting next to people I didn't know, the free information I have is that it's summer. I mean, unless I'm not in North America, it's summer, right? So I can turn to anybody at that table and say, hey, tell me what, was the highlight of your summer. So the point is that I walked in there, though, with that on my mind before I didn't hope to come up with that brilliant question at the luncheon. I walk in with 2 to 3 things to talk about. How did you get involved with this organization? What do you think of this Olympics? What's been the highlight of the Olympics for you? What do you think about this Ryan Lochte and these other 3 swimmers? And do you think there's more to this or not? What do you think? That's a current event. I'm prepared to talk about it, right? I don't think I would bring up the election, Billy, but I would bring up other things that are going on, the floods in Louisiana, whatever may be topical at the moment. But I'm prepared with things like that. So that would be another message to help, to really challenge yourself, is to always be prepared with things to talk about. I wouldn't go out on a date. I'm a married woman, but if I were going on a date and I was going to sit there with somebody, I would be prepared to ask him a few questions, like, so tell me what got you into this field, or what's the greatest challenge in your arena of work, or what if you could be doing anything differently with your work, what would it be? Those are questions I'd be prepared for on a date. But I'm not going to sit there and play with my food, because that's not fair, and that's not somebody that people like to be with.
Are you ready for the speed run?
You bet.
What individual, fiction or real, has made the most impact on your life?
I would say Atlas Shrugged, the book by Ayn Rand, made the biggest impact on my life. I read it when I was 13. And although I can't say at my wise old age I'm still a believer in everything that she wrote, because I don't share her politics, I will tell you that the impact it had on my life in becoming an entrepreneur was unbelievable and inspired me to do so.
If you could change one thing instantly in the world, what would it be?
Wow. I would, I'm not going to talk about peace, because I guess I would supply clean water to everyone. If I could have a pill for that, that's what I would do.
What's your biggest weakness?
I would say still food. Food is a huge weakness for me. I don't know why, but it's a constant battle every day.
What's your biggest strength?
Tenacity. Some people would call it chutzpah. No means just go to the next guy.
And do you have a favorite sound?
Sound of water.
Do you have any parting advice for our listeners today, Debra?
My advice to anybody, I don't know that I'm an expert on, even though I'm a conversation expert. My advice is, and I would say this to my children, and I hope I have gotten the message across, is that you can always reinvent yourself. Like, don't put labels on yourself or let other people do that. And just because today is maybe a tough day, even with food, I do that, Billy. If today I haven't been bad, thank goodness, but then tomorrow's a new day, and I'll reinvent myself. And the same goes with business. The same goes with relationships. Just put one step forward, and you don't have to follow the path that everyone thinks you need to follow. And it's so easy to say follow your own path. Well, most of us don't even know what that means for ourselves. And don't tell me to meditate, because I won't find it there either. Not somebody like me. But what I did learn is that everything I am today is because of positive and negative things I did in my past. And so every experience, whether it was waiting on tables, whether it was being a headhunter, whether it was being an engineer or being a mom, it all brought me to being successful at what I'm doing today.
I want to thank you so much, Debra, for joining us today and for your generous sharing. It's just been a real great pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Billy. It's been a privilege to be on your program. It's very different, and I really love the topic of fear, because we all have fears. So I really appreciate your topic and how you explore it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.